Hi everybody, welcome to Midweek. It is spring break. And, oh man, half of our staff is like going there in DR and I don't know where they're all gone. So it's pretty quiet around here, but we're gonna get you a midweek just because we're here and I know you're there. So glad you're here. Hey, last week we talked about just kind of these images of the church. I wanted to do another one today. Last week we said that the church was a fellowship. And we gather and we are nurturing in our relationship. Another metaphor that Jesus uses about the church, one of my favorites, it's a kind of the concept of family. The church is a family. There was one point where Jesus was with his disciples and he made this statement. He said, "Here are my brothers and mothers, and whoever does the will of God is my brother, my sister, and my mother." Now, I don't think for a moment Jesus was trying to say, Mary, you're out. He was actually more defining what makes the family of God. It's maybe a similar concept in Romans where he talks about the national Israel and spiritual Israel. What makes true Israel is ultimately going to be those who are in the Spirit. For Jesus, the same thing. What makes the real family of God is the fact of whether or not you are in Christ. Peter says it this way in 1 Peter 3:8. He says, and this is kind of the New Living, I like this. He says, you should be like one big happy family, full of sympathy toward each other, loving one another with tender hearts and humble minds. Now, I realize not every one of you grew up in a great family. And so I know for a lot of times if a person has a really, really sketchy relationship with their father, the idea that God is their father is not good for them. Some of you grew up in really sketchy families and you've just kind of abandoned them. So the concept of having the church as your family, it's like you don't want in. You take one of the other metaphors. Well, the reality is the church is our family. And if you've ever been somewhere like away from your biological family, you realize that's what Carrie and I were for years. Our whole 24 plus years we were away from our family. The only family we had was the church. Our kids adopted grandparents in the church. They adopted aunts and uncles in the church. Sometimes they even called them that. I know on the mission field, a lot of times the children will call certain other missionaries uncles and aunts. Why? Because that's kind of the concept in their mind. What happens in a family, a good family that is the church? Well, a number of things. Number one, and this is, I think, just really cool, is we move at the speed of family. What do I mean by that? Well, often these people have joked about how the church is slow to react to this and slow to react to that. And the church, in fact, they'll even use the term that the church is kind of like a glacier. Well, the reality is, I think we should be okay with that. Families move that way. What do I mean by that? Well, for those of you who have younger children, if you go on a hike, who determines how fast you go and how far you go? It certainly is not the most athletic in the family. It is, if you will, the weakest, the youngest, the one who can take a shorter stride. You move at the speed of family. You may want to accomplish a 10-mile hike, but if your little 2-year-old can't pull it and you can't carry it, or your 6-year-old can't pull that, let me tell you what, you can have all the desires in the world. And the only thing you can do is, you'd never do this, tie your kid to a tree and say, well, we'll be back in 3 hours to pick you up. You can't do that. It's illegal. So you move at the speed of family. I think churches do that. I think sometimes we may move slower than some people want in transitions and changes simply because, why? We want to bring the family together. So we move at the speed of family. I think another one is we sacrifice for the common good of the family. What does that mean? I remember when I was younger, we were poor in the dirt. We were not above the poverty line. And milk was like kind of expensive. I just quit drinking milk. Not because I didn't like it. It's because I wanted my kids. Back then, we didn't know anything about lactose intolerant. And I suppose now everyone's lactose intolerant. Back then, we thought you had to have milk, drink it for the calcium. And so, I never drank milk. I have never gotten back into the habit of drinking milk. It's not that I didn't like it. It's just that my kids needed it. See, that's what the doctor said. So we upped their calcium. We sacrificed. I never felt bad about that. I never got angry drinking my water. I love water. In fact, when I go to a restaurant, the idea of paying for something to drink is absurd to me. I like water. Put a little lemon in it and I feel high class. Well, the fact is, parents do those sacrifices all the time. I've often told people I really don't like musicals. My wife loves them. Periodically, she twists my arm. I watch one with her. I really don't like animation. Just not my favorite. My daughter loves them. And if I sit down with her and watch Shrek for the 758th time, then she thinks we've just died and went to heaven. Families do that all the time. When you move into the church, let me tell you an area where I think sometimes we sacrifice, and we make just kind of, if you will, some choices on behalf of maybe younger people or older folks or whatever the case may be. A lot of times when we're doing Bible studies or when we're doing worship, we may not hit the sweet spot of every person, but that's what families do all the time. They make sacrifices. Why? Because they love those who are different than them, just like parents do. I think another thing is we bear with each other like a family. The reality is, if one of your family members kind of frustrates you, you don't say, well, you're off the island. You're out of our family. I'm not going to have anything to do with you. You can't do that. It's your mother. You got to love her. It's your father. It's your sister. I mean, the fact is your brothers and sisters at some point in your family probably have frustrated you. But that doesn't mean you kind of vote them off the island. It means that you have to bear with them because they're in the family. And when Jesus used that imagery, don't think that he's missing the point that when we are a family, like Peter talks about, there are going to be people in the family that frustrate you. There's going to be uncles that are weird. There's going to be aunts that are, obnoxious. All of those things happen in families. They happen in the church too. And it means we bear up with one another. Just like Colossians says, Colossians 3 says, bear with each other. Forgive each other, just like Christ forgave you. That's family stuff. Families forgive all the time. Churches need to also. And then I think we also experience the support. Probably no place better than the support of a family. Encouragement, cheering each other on, accomplishing things together. I was witnessing a friend of mine who just sold some property. And the reason he sold the property is because my family, my kids have moved off and it's just too much for me to take care of. And I was just realizing, it's like, yeah, for him, what a great picture. His family allowed him to bear a heavier weight. That's what happens in the church, is when we can bear a heavier weight because we have people who support us and encourage us and pray with us. Last, I think, is just to catch the vision that that's what Christ longs for us. And that is, he longs for us to think of our church not as a place of spiritual goods and services, not as a place where I attend to do my worship gig, not as even a place where I just attend and get my input of spiritual nourishment, but it's a family. It's a place I get to serve, love, bear with, and move together and accomplish things just like the family that you belong to. I love that image. It's one of my favorites that Jesus gives to us. So we've had two. We got two more. We've talked about the church as a fellowship and the church as a family. We'll talk also about the church as an army. And that's another exciting one. But that's for the future. Coming up this weekend, we're going to be back in Joshua. We're going to be in chapter 8 last week. Appreciate so much your feedback. You were very positive. A little tough challenge when we looked at the issue of sin. But the next week, chapter 8, we're looking at how to regain property lost or possessions lost or, areas that we've lost due to sin. We look in chapter 8 of how to regain those. So it's going to be a really encouraging time together. Also, make sure you look online. We have a number of things coming up for Easter. And we're going to turn the corner this week. It's going to be the end of March, and then boom, Easter is here. So we have Holy Week, we have prayer times, we have the Seder meal sign up. That's got a limited number. We have the Good Friday service. I was reminded by no less than 3 people. I forgot to tell you the time. It is at 7 p.m. and it's Friday, Good Friday service. And then we have the weekend services for Easter. And there will be breakfast for all of those, including, by the way, Saturday night. So I look forward to seeing you whenever it's online or in person. But we're glad you're a part of the the family of God here at SFB. It's a great family. I love you. Take care.